So what I want to do here is have a discussion about the Teen Titans. And what I'm hoping is that at the end of all this, you'll walk away with a better understanding of the team, as well as why they've remained so popular throughout their time in DC Comics. So the Teen Titans first appeared in Brave and the Bold number 54 in June of 1964 and were created by writer Bob Haney and artist Bruno Premiani. To sidetrack here, because DC Comics had already established its core lineup in the form of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, and Aquaman, where these characters functioned as part of the Justice League and represented the cream of the crop, DC itself had continually looked to bolster its stories. While a handful of minor characters from the 1940s had been revamped and re-released in the 1950s, DC also looked to introduce entirely new creations who could in turn build their own audiences. However, with DC's top writers and artists working in their core titles, and because many of these stories were being released on a weekly basis, DC had neither the time nor the inclination to pull these writers and artists off their existing projects for the purpose of initiating a creation that may or may not succeed. To this end, Brave and the Bold was launched in 1955 as an anthology series designed to provide readers with a multitude of different stories, allowing DC to gauge fan reception for its creations and in turn spin those creations out into their own stories, assuming that they were popular. Where Brave and the Bold also saw stories involving Batman and others as a means to keep the title fresh in the minds of fans owing to Batman's popularity at the time. In addition to the introduction of the Suicide Squad, the Teen Titans were written as a means to target the teenage demographic of post-World War II readers, referred to as the baby boomer generation, with DC recognizing that past fans were growing older and losing interest in comics. With the post-World War II society seeing a massive expansion of humanity's population, DC looked to ensure their continued readership of existing fans while also looking to the future of prospective fans. However, as the core heroes of their lineup depicted the world through the eyes of adults, the idea behind the Teen Titans was to serve the other half of the equation. Covered in a 2011 interview by Michael Catron of the Comic Journal, writer Bob Haney had stated that by demand of DC editorial, in order for the Teen Titans team to succeed, it was believed that the team needed to consist of DC's most popular sidekicks at the time. As a result, and within the pages of Brave and the Bold number 54, the sidekicks of Batman, Flash, and Aquaman were rolled over into their own story, isolated from their adult counterparts. Centering on Bromwell's stick operating under the moniker of Mr. Twister, because the writing style of Bob Haney rarely offered explanations in the way of events leading up to a story, the coming together of Kid Flash, Dick Grayson, and Aqualad is never provided. Instead, with Mr. Twister whisking away the teenagers of a small town, the three heroes use their collective abilities to both locate the teenagers as well as face off against the villain. Coming to the realization that Mr. Twister's powers originate with the use of his staff, because of his detective training under Batman, Robin removes the staff from Twister's hand, leaving him powerless and rescuing the teenagers of the small town. As a result, and much like the original Justice League, Kid Flash, Aqualad, and Dick Grayson come to the realization that through their intelligence, ingenuity, and various abilities, they present a formidable threat to the villains of the world, after which they rechristen themselves as Teen Titans. Where this format of facing off against small-time villains remained a hallmark of Haney's storytelling, the roster of the Teen Titans also experienced somewhat of a revolving door format. Whether the various use of each member came and went due to other writers' use of them, or because of Haney's own style, is a question that I do not have the answer to. But because the series was designed to resonate specifically with teenagers, the series itself contained only teenagers. That said, because Haney was still relatively new to DC despite having been part of the comic book community for some time, if the various forms of conjecture are to be believed, Haney had not quite grasped the concept of Wonder Girl. To sidetrack for a second, within DC Comics and under the writing of Robert Kanigher, Wonder Girl was originally introduced as a younger version of Wonder Woman in the same fashion as Superboy being a younger version of Superman. Where the Wonder Girl stories were originally designed to provide an earlier life of Wonder Woman prior to her discovery of the human world during adulthood, Bob Haney had rolled her over into the Teen Titans, meaning that to the average reader, she was operating at the same time as Wonder Woman. In addition to this, because Haney almost never offered in-continuity explanations for changes, fans were largely left to their own devices to reconcile both the characters of Wonder Woman and Wonder Girl, giving way to the notion that Wonder Girl was an entirely different character. Where this would spin out into its own series of continuity problems prior to and after Crisis on Infinite Earths, her inclusion to the Teen Titans roster with the team's second appearance offered a depth that had not existed before, drawing in female readers who had previously steered away from the title. Spending another year or so making appearances in backup features or as part of larger anthology series like DC Show Showcase, in January of 1966, DC moved forward with a Teen Titans solo series, intending to keep the heroes isolated from the larger Justice League. As part of the same interview with the Comic Journal, Bob Haney had stated that this decision was actually a reflection of the Teen Titans audience itself. To sidetrack for a second, with the end of World War II ushering in a myriad of social and global conflicts, the baby boomer generation found itself swept up in the Age of Rebellion and protests ranging from government action in Vietnam to both civil rights and feminist movements. While the Teen Titans did not outright promote rebellion, it did empower teenagers by appealing to the belief that teenagers were entirely capable of solving their own problems without the oversight of adults. That said, with DC having already introduced Doom Patrol in 1963 as a team of heroes whose powers made them social outcasts, while the two groups did not cross over directly during Bob Haney's time, there was a slight bridge between the two that saw various heroes encountering one another or working side by side as part of a larger event. Instead, the Teen Titans title, like nearly all of comics during this time, shifted its focus from an adventure format to focusing on social issues within the United States proper, covering events that included discrimination and racism in multiple forms. As the mid-1960s led into the early to mid-1970s, the Teen Titans title found itself struggling to maintain its reader base, owing in part to the Comics Code Authority, which greatly reduced how DC's writers were able to depict the Teen Titans regarding their views of the government. The other half of this was the makeup of the team itself. Because American society was moving continually toward the direction of greater multicultural acceptance, comic book fans who were not white found themselves alienated due to the lack of minority representation. As a result, and finding itself lagging behind in sales, in 1973, the Teen Titans line of comics was canceled. Remaining out of publication until 1976, the various members of the Teen Titans returned to their normal roles as sidekicks to heroes of the DC universe. However, because the series had been canceled without closure regarding its different members, writer Paul Levitz and artist Bob Rozakis revived the series for a short-lived 9-issue run, closing out the remaining plot threads and having the team disband after coming to the conclusion that they had grown out of their teenage phases. Following this, and in October of 1980, the Teen Titans series was relaunched under the branding of New Teen Titans Volume 1 with Marv Wolfman as writer. Where Marv Wolfman and artist George Perez had intended to pick up with the conclusion of Paul Levitz's run by rolling the Teen Titans roster over into a more adult-oriented series called Titans, for reasons that I have not been able to verify, Wolfman and Perez were unable to utilize the Titans name on its own. As a result, and instead of going forward with a completely new creation and risking failure, Wolfman and Perez relaunched the series under the moniker of New Teen Titans with a mix of both old and new faces. Returning to his interview with Comics Journal, Wolfman had stated that to his mind, the stories of the Teen Titans in the late 1960s and throughout the 70s were indicative of archaic beliefs coupled with a silly manner of storytelling, save for the comics that dealt with real-world events. In addition to this, because Wolfman had spent so much time at Marvel under the direction of Roy Thomas, his experience during the revamp of Marvel's X-Men in the mid-1970s allowed him to witness firsthand that the driving force behind success of comics during this time was due to emphasis on character development in conjunction with storytelling. Maintaining this ideology, under Marv Wolfman, the roster of the Teen Titans was modified to see the return of Dick Grayson, but also included Beast Boy, formerly of the Doom Patrol, Cyborg Victor Stone, Starfire, and Raven. Considered to be the 1-2 punch of the Teen Titans line, both Marv Wolfman and George Perez maintained emphasis on character development among the individual teammates, but also looked to the idea of expanding the team's rogues gallery in an effort to present them as a serious group. Where these villains included a myriad of characters, both large and small, including Trigon and the organization Hive, the most notable came in the form of Deathstroke. Created explicitly for the Teen Titans line and first appearing in New Teen Titans issue number 2, Deathstroke's history is part and parcel to the team itself. Where his origin will be covered in a future video, the involvement of Deathstroke in the Teen Titans line allowed Wolfman and Perez to depict the group as a serious team, facing off against a villain whose ruthlessness was unparalleled and whose cunning, guile, and combat prowess rivaled that of Batman. Coming to a head in Tales of the Teen Titans, a short-lived line of comics which filled the gap between New Teen Titans Volume 1 and New Teen Titans Volume 2, in issues 42, 43, and 44, as well as New Teen Titans Annual Number 3, DC launched the Judas Contract storyline, which centered on Deathstroke infiltrating the team by way of a girl named Tara, who possessed the power to manipulate Earth's tectonic plates. Culminating in the defeat of Deathstroke, the Judas Contract was notable owing to the idea of the story seeing Dick Grayson cast aside the mantle of Robin and instead operate under the mantle of Nightwing. Where this is covered in my video on Dick Grayson Explained, because the New Teen Titans had surpassed the Justice League in sales, becoming DC's DC's most popular comic at the time, in the year leading up to Crisis on Infinite Earths, the New Teen Titans did not receive a complete reboot. Instead, the series was relaunched as New Teen Titans Volume 2, with the roster growing to include Jericho, as well as Dick Grayson under the Nightwing moniker. Where both Wolfman and Perez initially focused on ensuring fans' perception of the title did not go undiminished. With issue number 5, Perez departed in order to travel to Marvel to work on the Infinity Gauntlet storyline, with subsequent artists taking up in his place. While this did not see a drastic drop in sales, the combination of Wolfman and Perez was one rarely seen in comics, with the two sharing a single mind and producing some of the team's most popular stories. Where the writing of Wolfman kept the series alive, because the post-crisis continuity saw a series of retcons regarding the various histories of DC's characters, Wolfman found himself working double duty by ensuring both the development of the series' characters as well as reconciling the updated origins. However, despite his best efforts, sales of the New Teen Titans began to decline, and where different reasons have been offered to why, in truth, I would look to both Marvel Comics and DC itself as the catalysts. Within the larger DC landscape, Batman had been consistently declining due to the Comics Code requiring that his stories provide less emphasis on darker content. Following the retirement of editor Mort Weisinger, the stories of Superman saw a reduction in his abilities under the direction of Julius Schwartz, who looked to emphasize more down-to-earth content, and the remainder of the Justice League had either been tainted by the depictions outside of comics, or else had never really been popular in the first place. Where DC had attempted to revitalize the post-crisis landscape by reforming the Justice League as an international consortium of various heroes, in the end, the various publications of DC had continued to falter. On the other side of the field, however, Marvel had allowed Chris Claremont free rein on the X-Men, crafting some of the best stories in the team's history, and alongside Frank Miller on the Daredevil title, had used their success as a template for the rest of their lineup. That said, with Frank Miller coming on board to write The Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One, as well as Alan Moore writing The Killing Joke, DC found that these darker stories resonated with fans owing to the idea that the general public had moved past viewing society as one of innocence and instead viewed it truly and harshly. Paving the way for the rest of DC's lineup and ushering in the Bronze Age of comics, in 1988, and with both Wolfman and Perez returning, New Teen Titans was rolled over into New Titans while continuing the numbering of the New Teen Titans Volume 2. Maintaining the New Teen Titans roster, the initial launch of New Titans was noticeable in that it provided an origin story for Wonder Girl Donna Troy in the post-crisis continuity. Instead of being a younger version of Wonder Woman, Donna Troy was now one of 12 children from across the cosmos who were destined to free the Greek Titans from imprisonment by Zeus. Bestowed with powers identical to Wonder Woman and placed within society as a sleeper of sorts, because both this origin of Donna Troy and the work of Wolfman within the New Titans series had failed to engender success, under the direction of DC president and executive editor Jeanette Kahn, Marv Wolfman lost total control of the series and was provided with an editor in the form of Jason Peterson, who engineered a wholesale relaunch of the series, sending the title into an absolute tailspin, where DC continued to revamp the title against the advice of Wolfman, even going so far as to remove Nightwing and introduce Kyle Rayner and a host of other characters. The sales of New Titans collapsed in their entirety, causing the series to fall from one of DC's highest-selling titles to one of their worst. As a result, and in 1996, the New Titans series was canceled. Feeling that the series had moved away from the roots of what made it popular among readers, in 1996, the title was renamed to Teen Titans and written by Dan Jurgens. Coming out of Zero Hour, Crisis in Time, which allowed DC to rectify various continuity issues that remained after Crisis on Infinite Earths, the Teen Titans benefited from this soft reboot by wiping the slate clean and reinstating an entirely new team. Led by Adam Ray Palmer and consisting of Cody Driscoll, Isaiah Crockett, Princess, and Tony Manetti, all of whom had been created for the series, Teen Titans Volume 2 was released as a monthly series, lasting 2 years before its cancellation in 1998. Leading into 1999 and under the writing of Devin Grayson, following the Teen Titans cancellation, the series shifted its focus to a more modern and updated depiction of the heroes under the name of Titans. Looking to boost the success of the series by focusing on established heroes, DC began shifting around their various titles owing to the fact that with so many heroes featured in the Justice League International and ancillary titles, DC was stretched thin on heroes who could be used to freshen up the Titans brand. Eliminating the concept of Justice League International in favor of the traditional Justice League team as it was written by Grant Morrison, the change allowed DC to pick the best of their lineup outside of the Justice League proper without concern for continuity issues, meaning that the Titans title was launched with the inclusion of Argent, Roy Harper, Cyborg, Damage, Donna Troy, Wally West, Jesse Quick, Nightwing, Starfire, and Tempest. Viewed by fans as DC's recognition of the success that came with familiar publications, readers who had fallen out from the title began to return. This, combined with the writing style of Devin Grayson, meant that emphasis was placed on building the characters up with a familiarity that harkened back to the height of Wolfman's run, while also coinciding with the already established stories of DC's post-crisis continuity. Running for a total of 50 issues, following the first 20, Devin Grayson had departed the title, citing the fact that despite her workings, because the series proved to be so popular, DC had elected to begin beefing up the individual characters. Feeling as though her work was being capitalized on and in some cases ruined, Devin left DC in its entirety, leaving the comic to be taken over by Jay Faber. Considered to have been a lackluster in comparison to the work of Devin, during a 2012 interview with Titans Tower, a blog designed to keep up with comic book news with emphasis on the Titans-related titles, Faber had stated that the struggles of his time on Titans and the subsequent decrease in sales had stemmed from creative disagreements between himself and the title's editor. Where Faber had looked to pay homage to Wolfman's time on the publications, he also intended to make the series wholly his own. And so following his departure, the remaining 8 issues were finished out by Tom Peyer, after which the series was cancelled. Taken over by Geoff Johns in 2003, under his control, the Titans concept was abandoned yet again in favor of returning to the Teen Titans line. However, because DC had previously launched Young Justice as a companion series that utilized the leftovers of the Teen Titans line following its changeover to Titans, under Geoff Johns, Young Justice was also cancelled and the various heroes of each group were rolled over into 2 separate teams, the Teen Titans and the Outsiders. Taking place around the same time as the release of the Teen Titans cartoon show, the work of Geoff Johns coincided with a fresh influx of readers who were intrigued by the show and were looking for a means to segue into the comic book realm. Consisting of Beast Boy, Impulse, Tim Drake, Starfire, Superboy Connell, and the new Wonder Girl Cassie Sandsmark, the work of Geoff Johns on the series served as a de facto lead-up to the events of Infinite Crisis, in that Johns retconned the origin of Superboy as a clone of Superman and Lex Luthor, as well as transitioning the personalities of the team's various members to reflect how they would look in the post-Infinite Crisis continuity. Leading directly into Infinite Crisis itself, because the event served as a 20th anniversary of DC's original Crisis on Infinite Earths, as well as clearing up plot threads left behind by both the original Crisis and Zero Hour, fans who came into the title by way of the TV show found themselves in a perfect jumping off point for both the Titans themselves and DC as a whole. However, in the eyes of fans, the popularity seemed like a botched experiment due to the fact that following Infinite Crisis, DC initiated a 1-year later event which quite literally picked up a year after the conclusion of Infinite Crisis. With Geoff Johns working on a reinvigoration of the Green Lantern line, the events of Rebirth, Sinestro Corps, and Red Lanterns had all led into Blackest Night and Brightest Day. Crossing over into the entirety of DC's lineup, the Teen Titan-related titles, including the newly launched Titans under Jed Winnick, saw former teammates revived from the dead and forced to do battle against one another. Continuing to use the series as a testbed for the creation or elevation of teenage heroes within the DC universe, following the conclusion of Geoff Johns' run, the series was handed over to writer J.T. Kroll with issue number 88. Where fans had expressed a bit of trepidation due to the various roster changes in quick sequence, on the whole, most seemed to want Wonder Girl, Superboy, and Kid Flash to be included as part of the team, with a multitude of requests for the son of Batman, Damian Wayne. While the series was not necessarily the best it had ever been, in the eyes of fans, they had received a reprieve from the continued shakeup of the roster and the intermingling of team members between the main Teen Titans itself and the ancillary publications of DC. However, the reprieve offered during J.T. Kroll's run and the inclusion of Damian Wayne as the newest Robin was indeed short-lived, owing to the launch of the New 52 and the line-wide reboot of DC Comics. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and bring this video to an end, and I know we left out New 52, but what we're going to do is when Teen Titans Rebirth comes out, we're actually going to cover the events of the New 52 and then wrap back around into the pre-New 52 continuity to give this overall explanation of what changes DC's made to the team in the new DC Rebirth continuity. With that being said, we're going to bring this to an end, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.